When done correctly, a prequel movie can be the perfect accompaniment to an established property. You can look at something like X-Men First Class as being the prime example of kicking new life into a franchise that was sagging, and don't worry, I'll get to those main offenders later on, by expanding a world and diving deeper on characters in a way that felt familiar but fresh. Across the multitude of prequel offerings out there though, one element that is often so present and accounted for is a big reveal or two. And more often than not, these big reveals can end up playing a big part in how audience responds to a particular movie. The trouble is, sometimes these reveals suck and can ruin the stories they're trying to fill in the blanks of. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are the 9 worst reveals in movie prequels. Number 9. MIDI what now? Star Wars The Phantom Menace. One of the first head-scratching moments in George Lucas's The Phantom Menace for many fans was the reveal that the dreamy otherworldly magic and mystique of the Force was instead a cold, hard matter of science. In the original Holy Trilogy of movies, the very concept of the Force was introduced, with that being a power and ability that was, as shown in the case of Leia, often one that a person didn't even know they had. By the time of 1999's The Phantom Menace, however, it was revealed that the Force could be detected by testing somebody's midi-chlorian count. Simply put, the higher the midi-chlorians, the more powerful a person would be. With it being possible to run this test on anybody and everybody, this means that the mystery of the Force and users of the Force was stripped back in place of instead revealing how a simple science-based biological test could give a distinctive yay or nay as to what abilities someone may have within them and how powerful those abilities could become if harnessed in the right or wrong way. Number 8. Leatherface's origin, The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Beginning. Within the realms of horror, so often less is more when it comes to the backstories of the genre's most notorious figures. Take the opening moments of 2006's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Beginning, a prequel to the 2003 Chainsaw remake, which gave us the origins of Leatherface. After his mother died in childbirth, young Leatherface, or Thomas Hewitt as he was known then, is dumped in the trash at the slaughterhouse where his premature birth took place. Skipping ahead 30 years later, we see how Thomas is now working at the one and same place for the one and same manager. The reveal of how Leatherface came to be was all a bit meh in and of itself, but the biggest letdown for audiences was that the film told a story that simply didn't need to be told. Sure, The Beginning was a prequel movie, but you still didn't need to go as far as pulling the curtain back on the basic fundamentals of the mask-wearing mystique previously associated with Leatherface. Thankfully, the film didn't try to spotlight too much more of little Tommy embarking on his life story, with those moments instead showcased in 2017's awful movie, Leatherface. Number 7. Annabelle was created by a pissed-off burglar. After the Annabelle doll had been glimpsed in The Conjuring and heavily used in the marketing push for that 2013 film, it was a major disappointment to see the Annabelle movie reveal that the porcelain doll became possessed because of a pissed-off burglar. In Annabelle, the Forms' neighbours are brutally attacked in their own home by who would turn out to be their neighbour's daughter, Annabelle, and her partner. Having been caught by the police, Annabelle then slits her throat as she's holding the doll. It's later explained that Annabelle, the person, was part of a satanic cult and had intended to conjure up an evil spirit into this doll, which all felt like a massive letdown when it came to the origins of the creepy as balls doll seen in The Conjuring. This villain doesn't just have one backstory though, and going further, Annabelle actually got its own prequel picture in the form of 2017's Annabelle Creation. Complete with a reveal of its own, the climax of Creation revealed that the Annabelle character was really a possessed kid called Janice who had escaped from an orphanage and renamed herself, to then later imbue that demonic spirit into the doll at the start of 2014's Annabelle, and yeah, it's confusing and even more disappointing. Number 6. Legolas knew about Gimli, the Desolation of Smaug. To some, Peter Jackson's Hobbit trilogy drew ire for the fact that it milked a 310-page book and spun it into 3 movies across a combined running time of just over 9 hours. Part of the charm of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit novel is that it's an easily digestible read and can be whizzed through in a sitting or two. That easily digestible element obviously went out of the window though when Jackson decided to string the tale out over a trio of lengthy movies. But while the Hobbit films do have some brilliant moments and some not so brilliant moments, one reveal that left audiences cringing was the moment in the second flick where Legolas is shown a picture of young Gimli. Of course, Gimli and Legolas would go on to have a love-hate relationship across the 3 Lord of the Rings films. The disappointing part of all of this though was that it basically means that Legolas knew who Gimli was decades before he ever met him. And even putting that aside, it was a reveal that felt absolutely ham-fisted and totally unnecessary from Peter Jackson, especially as this was solely a Jackson idea that was not part of the original tale. Number 5. You remember those acid-blooded aliens, right? Alien vs. Predator. While Alien vs. Predator was never particularly marketed as a prequel movie to either of the crossover's titular franchises, the simple fact of the matter is that AVP is most definitely an Alien prequel by its very nature. Taking that on board then, it makes zero sense how the crew of the Nostromo would have no idea what multi-mouth threat they were facing in 1979's Alien. In Ridley Scott's iconic 2122 set Alien, Ellen Ripley and co. were clueless about the mysterious otherworldly menace that was stalking them. Where Alien vs. Predator comes into this is that film shows how those toothy aliens had actually already visited Earth back in 2004, making humanity well aware of their existence. That is, unless somehow human civilization had forgotten that xenomorphs were a thing, because clearly the sight of a savage, slimy, brutal alien species is something that's easy to forget ever happened. And that's not to mention the aliens invading suburbia in the sequel as well. And now both of these events are presumably covered up to the public, but the fact that both flicks took place in the modern day 100 years before the events of the first Alien undermines certain elements of that plot. Number 4. The anti-hero cannibal, Hannibal Rising. While Hannibal Lecter has so often been depicted as a multi-layered character who is far from your average horror movie villain, 2007's Hannibal Rising prequel went one further and turned the cannibalistic Dr. Lecter in waiting into a more heroic figure. At worst, Hannibal here is an anti-hero, but at best, he's a full-on knight in shining armor. Once it became apparent that Hannibal Rising was to focus on the younger years of Lecter, many feared that we may get to see a little more to Hannibal's backstory than we necessarily needed. But the most disappointing reveal of the film was how Hannibal embarked on a mission of honor and revenge after his sister was killed and eaten by a Nazi-led group of Lithuanian soldiers. We know Lecter has smarts, we know Lecter isn't shy about killing, and we know Lecter has a taste for human flesh, but Hannibal Rising's decision to have Hannibal chew his way through a revenge mission left a bad taste in the mouth. Nearly as bad a taste as Hannibal Lecter having to eat a casserole made out of his sister's remains. Number 3. BFF'S, Maleficent. As soon as Angelina Jolie signed on to headline Maleficent, you always had the sense that this feared villain immortalized in Disney's 1959 Sleeping Beauty may not end up being quite as evil as previous iterations of the character. Designed as a prequel to established lore, 2014's Maleficent lost a lot of people by revealing a softer side to Jolie's titular witch. While this version of Maleficent saw the character sticking to the tried and tested formula of placing a curse on young Aurora, which would have her fall into a deep slumber upon turning 16 years of age, the reason for that curse being that Maleficent got the hump about not being invited to a christening, the 2014 movie vastly changed the ending of what we'd all come to know and expect from this tale. In the movie, it was revealed that Jolie's villain began to feel sorrow at the curse she had placed on Aurora, to the point where she regretted ever doing it. But to go one further, the big reveal of this prequel picture saw Maleficent be the one to pull Aurora out of her deep sleep after she, rather than Prince Philip, kissed her on her forehead to wake her up. Number 2. Losing the Will to Live, Star Wars Revenge of the Sith. If you ask certain corners of the Star Wars fanbase, they'll proclaim that so much of George Lucas's prequel trilogy had them losing the will to live. But for poor Padme, that was literally the case by the time that Revenge of the Sith's closing credits began to roll. Now, some may disagree, but Revenge of the Sith is a damn fine movie. That said, even the biggest fans of the film will admit that there are certain flawed moments that left us all shaking our heads. And when it comes to disappointing reveals, Revenge of the Sith's depiction of Padme's death was one that left many a Star Wars nerd raging in disbelief. Was it because of the trauma caused by her fella embracing the dark side? Was it the fact that she was giving birth to twins? Was it the fact that those births took place on an asteroid? No, the cringe-inducing reveal of the cause of Padme's death was given by a droid explaining how Padme had simply lost the will to live. Throw in how the original Star Wars trilogy saw Leia talk up childhood memories of her mother, even though her mother died mere moments after giving birth to her, and you can see why the fate of Padme is still today viewed as one of the biggest eye-rollers across the entire Star Wars saga. Number 1. We need to talk about Wade, X-Men Origins Wolverine. Ryan Reynolds as Wade Wilson, that's a pretty good fit, right? And even though X-Men Origins Wolverine is a movie that is so often a mess, one of the few bright lights of the picture is Reynolds as Wade quipping wise and devouring scenery whenever he's involved in the action. As Wilson, Reynolds was absolutely perfect as the irritable dick who just had to go one joke too far all the time. It was annoying, it was cheesy, it was toilet humor, but it was Deadpool. Unfortunately, disappointment was around the corner for fans of Wade Wilson, with the X-Men Origins Wolverine's final act revealing Wade to be a ludicrously overpowered big bad for Hugh Jackman's Logan to take down. Now, Deadpool as a villain is fine in and of itself. I mean, the character's formative comic book years often positioned him as a rogue opposite the New Mutants, but Wade as the bad guy wasn't the issue here, with the bigger problem being the reveal that this version of Wilson now had been given Cyclops' optic blasts, John Wraith's teleportation powers, and actual katanas that came out of his fists. Fans had waited years to see Deadpool on the big screen, had been treated to some genuine chuckles from Reynolds as Wade, only to then be greeted by the monstrosity that was Mutant 11. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Were there any reveals that annoyed you more than these? And did you react as badly to these as I did? Either way, while you're down there, could you give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to whatculture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.